Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Keim Report wherever you get your podcast. You're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Ampire Media. That's AMPIRE. Always much appreciated when you tune in. And don't forget, you can always read my work on ESPN.com. I had a story up the other day, a couple days ago, which I've told you about the quarterbacks and just what, and talking to people around the league, what they think of the three choices for the Commanders, which would be, of course, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, and JJ McCarthy. Anyway, that's up. And then later in the week, I'll have another story looking into the draft and just, after we talk to Dan Quinn, Adam Peters on Thursday, that's a pre-draft presser. This is a big week for the Commanders. So I have my pal Nicki Jhabvala from the Washington Post come on to discuss this week and what it means as far as the future of the Commanders quarterback position. And, they're going to have a lot of guys in for their top 30 visits on the 16th and 17th. It's the last day they can have people in. So this is a crucial week for everything. And so, I know some people want everybody to be definitive about or think everything's definitive about what's going on with the Commanders and the quarterback position. The reality is it is not. This is a big week for that. They may have a lean, they may have a strong lean, but before they're going to settle on a guy, they're going to get through this week because those top three quarterbacks are all coming in. And that, of course, is Jaden Daniels, Drake May, and JJ McCarthy. So just a final step in this entire process, and then they can settle on exactly for sure who they're going to target with the second overall pick. And while there are a lot of signs and signals that point to Daniels in particular, until what I've learned long ago, until you know for sure, you're really trying to make an educated guess. And that's what everybody has been doing. There is nothing, nothing definitive with this at this point. So I apologize for not being more definitive, but we can't be. Nobody can, because nobody knows for 100% certainty where this is going. Again, it can look like it's going a certain way, but until we get there and see, or until you hear for sure, it's hard to say for sure. Anyways, also now I know we've spent a lot of time talking about Jaden Daniels, but I have guests on talking about the quarterbacks in general, and they may like one over the other. I'm still trying to get people on to talk about Drake May and JJ McCarthy in particular. And I'm going to have someone on Wednesday. Hopefully that comes through to talk about JJ McCarthy, or I'm going to interview him on Wednesday. And I'm still working and have been for a while to get someone on to talk about Drake May. And there's been a couple of times where it looked like it was going to happen a certain day, and it fell through and it fell through and it fell through. So we'll see. I'm still working on that because I'm not taking it for granted that they're going to draft Jaden Daniels, even if a lot of people that I talk to in the league believe that he'll be the guy. But again, a lot of people in the league thought it was going to be Ben Johnson as the coach, even though a lot of those people in the league loved Dan Quinn. So that's where we're at right now. But again, it's a big week. So that's what Nicki and I are going to talk about, and what this means for the Commanders and their future, and just talking a lot about just various positions, et cetera, including, of course, quarterback. Also, a special guest makes an appearance with Nicki. I think you're going to enjoy it. Stay tuned. Here's my conversation with Nicki Jhabvala from the Washington Post. So I received a text from Nicki shortly before we taping this, and it's one of the best texts I've ever received for good reason. But I think it says, can I wait 5 minutes? Let me read it. Can I get 5 minutes to change a diaper? That is fantastic, Nicki. So take it from here. It's the best text because of what it means. So can you show everybody your little gift?
Here's my guy.
There you go.
My guy, just chillaxing over here.
Yes.
Yeah, he was born on the 28th. His name's Julian. Yeah, I've been waiting to get this guy for a long time. So it's really awesome. He's really great. He's the best.
I don't know if you can confirm this, but I do have a good source who said it's an 18-year multi-million-dollar deal.
It is fully guaranteed. I mean, it is
no incentives.
Player friendly. Let me tell you that.
It usually is. Are there? Yeah, I'm curious about the incentives.
Oh, I mean, it's basically whatever he wants. Yeah.
There you go. But anyways, we're all happy for you, and you're going to be a terrific mom, and we all know that. Thanks. So, and you're going to still be doing all this stuff, and so now you get to do it with little
Yeah,
baby in your
we just
shoulder.
multitask. We have more on the pod, an
Yes.
extra guest.
Yeah.
So
It's the start of a youth movement for you. So
exactly.
that's fantastic.
We're trying to get younger,
Yeah.
building the core of our team over here.
That's
So,
right. Yeah. And I will be curious to hear how much coffee he's drinking in the next couple of years. So
I mean, he does grab from my cup every now and then. I'm like, no, you still got the bottle, big guy. But in due time, in due time.
the best, and we're going off in a different way here, but the best video, one of the best videos I've seen recently was a little, like a 1-year-old, I think on her first birthday, having a plate of ice cream, and her eyes, the first bite, her eyes went like, oh my God, this is fantastic. And she just grabbed the ice cream from her mom, ice cream cone from her mom, and like wouldn't let go. I'm like, all right,
Yeah,
there
what
you
they've been
go.
missing
So,
this whole time.
anyways, so, but people didn't want to turn, this is welcome to Baby Talk with Nicki and John.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyways, but speaking of a youth movement, let's get to the draft.
What a
And
segue.
yeah, there you go. Less than 2 weeks finally before the
Mm.
draft. So, what do you what do you think they think at this point? What do you think they know at this point about that second pick?
Yeah. Well, I think, at this recording, they're still not done. I mean,
Right.
next Wednesday, the 17th is the last day that teams can bring in players for top 30 visits. They can still talk to them on Zoom thereafter, but that's their last day. And the Commanders are taking it all the way up to the deadline, which I think there's a bit of brilliance there. If it was planned for that reason, for them to be, if not the last teams to meet with, the last, top quarterbacks in this group. So they're scheduled to bring in Drake May and Jaden Daniels next week. I believe JJ McCarthy also next week.
Yes.
So they're still doing their due diligence at this point. And, it's 2 weeks, which seems close to us because we've been talking about it for months on end, but I don't believe they have fully made up their minds. I don't think any team has fully made up their minds. The Commanders have the luxury of having their pick of anybody outside, presumably Caleb Williams, but there's still a lot of work that needs to be done going into these last couple of weeks.
And, because you hear sometimes someone will say, well, if they haven't made up their mind, does it mean they really like someone? I kind of look at the other way. I think it's due diligence. How do you view it?
Yep. No, I think it's absolutely right. I think they can, you can go into this process. It's sort of like the coaching search. You can go into it with favorites or guys you really like, but your mind can change upon meeting them or interviewing them and, seeing how they work and talking to others. So, it's not it's not like one guy is always at the top. I think there are some years where that may be the case where there's a clear, runaway front runner, but this year I don't think that's the case. I think they're really doing their hardest to vet every single guy.
And I think part of it too is, like you said, there's one guy at the top in Caleb, and then there's 3 other guys that you can make a case for. Some may be stronger than others, but you can make a case for a few other guys at that second spot. Or, I don't think trading back, but anyway, we'll get into that. But I think that to me is the hard part. So you need to make sure. I mean, so how key, how key will these visits be to this process? Do you think it's a final step, or could it determine maybe the ultimate guy, or is it just a matter of let's go through the process before settling on a guy?
Both depends on where they're at in the process, but they have met with these guys before. It's just been briefly. So, to get them in the building and to really, spend some good time with them. Because a lot of these visits, they typically come in the night before, go out to dinner with a group. And then the following day is like that car wash of interviews with coaches, coordinators, the whole nine, really, touring the facility, whatever. So really getting them into the building, I think that those hours can make a huge difference. I mean, I think these top 30s are incredibly important, arguably the most important, depending on the year and the circumstances and the team, of course. But, every little piece is just like another chance to gain more information. I think that's how they're approaching this. Because I mean, like we said, it's not there's not like one guy that just completely stands out. Maybe in their mind at this point there is, but there's still a lot of work to be done that could, sway them or make them feel differently or confirm what they believe about this guy.
Right. Right. I mean, I think that's a lot of it too, is they may have a guy that they say right now, well, this is the guy we like, but let's just go through it just in case something changes. So what do you think, I mean, we kind of know, like, what do you think they're going to be looking for during these visits?
I think a lot of it is, how do they come off? Just understanding how they approach things. You can kind of get a feel of their character, learn more about their background, their family. You could even get them on the board more, learn more about just their football acumen a bit. Just seeing how they are with the other coaches. Do they have a good rapport with them? Can you get a good sense of how he might be with other players in the locker room? I think just those hours of being with somebody, you always get a good sense of who they are as a person outside of football, and that can tell you quite a bit. And you got to remember these are significant investments. They are people at the end of the day, but for these teams, they're significant investments. So you want to make sure you're trying to make the best one you can.
How different do you think the approach has been? I know, like, this is somewhat unusual because it is quarterbacks. And like when Chase was here, like he became a clear second pick, although some people still thought maybe trade back, but they never had a great offer. Or do you take one of the quarterbacks? But how different do you think this process has been compared to the last few years?
I think hugely different. And like a lot of it, this is not a knock on the previous regime. I think the last regime was dealing with a lot outside of football, that at times may have taken priority just because that was the circumstance. The head coach was also the lead decision maker and the primary voice of the team. That is a lot for a team in turmoil, I would say.
Yes, that's right.
Um, but this one, I feel like they have a multi-year plan in place. They know what they want, or they at least have a plan of finding the type of guys they want this year and really building a foundation so they can create that for years to come. I mean, you look at the free agent class, a lot of these veterans, they share a lot of similar qualities, quality players, get them on shorter term deals, good leaders, guys who can show the younger group the way. And that kind of sets the tone as you're rebuilding, and which they are. I don't care what you call it, reset, rebuild. They're
Recalibrate.
tearing it down and starting over, so you bring in these veterans who kind of set the tone, and you can build the team through the draft that way, which they've said they wanted to do, and they've set themselves up to do that. You're not going to hit on every pick, of course, but you give yourself a chance to do that, and you can build a solid team. So I like what they've done and the steps they've taken so far. We'll see if it pans out.
And I was going to say too, like, when you look at this group and how they process everything and it's carrying over to the draft, like, did you ever feel like the last couple of years that there was a plan to this extent, and the way they executed the plan was similar? Is it that different? Is this group in a better position to do that because they had more cap space and all that? Or do you think there's just a better plan and execution of it?
I think that's both. They have more resources, but they have a better plan too. I felt a lot of times over the last few years that they were winging it. And I know there was more to it than that. They weren't just picking guys out of thin air, but I didn't get the sense that there was a long-term plan, because the plan seemed to change a lot.
It changed.
The type of
There was a
players
different
they
thing.
wanted. Yeah, the model they wanted, kind of the goals they had for the team. I mean, it felt like the goalposts kind of move a little bit, which is hard to build any sort of continuity when you're doing that. But I feel like this group came in and, right away they established what they wanted, like the meetings with scouts on the specific traits they wanted in players for every position, and really establishing that from day one. And making sure everybody was on the same page. So whether they're on the road or not, they all know the types of players they want. And I thought that was huge. And I think a lot of good organizations do that. So it was, that was good to see.
I think sometimes too, in the past, I felt like there was the plan would change based on where they wanted to be versus based on where they really were, if that
Correct.
makes sense.
I would
And so
agree. Yeah.
I think like this group seems to know where they're at with this process.
Mhm.
I think makes a difference. And it also seems like, the things you hear is like, the input they're taking is from a lot of people. Now we'll see how that pans out, but I think that's part of it sounds like that's part of the difference.
I like the process. We'll see, again, this is the happiest time of year. Everybody feels good
Right.
about their decisions, and they will all stick to the board somehow. and they will all get their guy somehow and, come away feeling great about the draft. But, we'll see.
We had him rated as a first round pick and he was there on
Oh,
the
yeah.
third. I couldn't believe it. Yeah, that's
We
every,
stuck to the board. We got our
and,
guy.
and I will say,
Like
like,
now.
right. And I think one thing too, like because Peters has that reputation, he did pretty well in the lower rounds with San Francisco. That was where they gave him
Mhm.
more of his input. And then Lance Newmark has a good reputation with it. So, I think I think you brought it up earlier. If you know the traits, you know what you're looking for.
Yeah.
When you know all that, and there seems to be a specific model where, like, when you look at their top 30 visits for corners, you want a big corner. You know what I mean? Like there's definitely some traits that you see, and like then it's like once you can narrow that down, like, okay, then how does he fit what this group wants?
Right. No, exactly. And I mean, I like that they had these really in-depth planning meetings. And, one of the things that came up is, even if you're on the road scouting another player, you got to be looking out for, another player at another position that may fit these traits. So they are all on board with every facet of what they're looking for, which I think is important. I also think it's important that they've been tight-lipped. It sucks for us. Genuinely sucks for us. But for their perspective, they need to be, they need to be, and they've done, sadly, a good job.
I hate to tell you, Nicki, but I actually do know I'm part of the decision-making process. I'm
Yeah,
just
okay.
not allowed to say yet. So
Right.
I'm going to reveal my choice around 8:30 on in about a weekend on Thursday, whatever the day is, the 26th, I think it is it?
25th, but
yeah,
go for it on the 26th.
I'll tell you what I knew at that time.
Okay.
So, but it is, and that's what, that like in the past, you might know the hard part with knowing, like we knew that Chase was going to be the guy.
Sure.
But when you're picking in the middle of the first, you don't really know because there could be so many variables and scenarios that develop that a range of guys they like. But even within that, feels different.
It does. It does. And I think a lot of it is just the magnitude of this draft. I mean, we go into every draft and we feel like, oh, this is the most important one in years. But this you can genuinely say that this is a start of a new ownership, new era for this franchise after 20 plus years of craziness, and they have their chance to get their quarterback after cycling through dozens over the years. They might miss. But you do, at least for me, I feel a little bit more confident that if they do miss, they'll find a way to regroup. Because we've seen them do it before. I mean, San Francisco may have gotten a little lucky in that they had Brock Purdy just sitting there waiting when Trey Lance didn't work out, but they did know to pick Brock Purdy. So that's the other thing that I like about their plan is I feel like they have contingencies in place.
Right.
And I didn't sense that with the last regime, with coaches and players too.
Yes.
They
have,
have
definitely.
They're filling out positional groups and they're deep already. Like I look at the linebacking core. I think that's the one that has changed the most already, obviously in free agency with Frankie Louvu and Bobby Wagner and, the other depth guys they've brought in. But you also look at their coaching staff, you got Cliff Kingsbury as coordinator, but you also brought in Brian Johnson as, pass game coordinator, who's, is on the rise to becoming, again, a coordinator and head coach. So if they have tremendous success and Cliff Kingsbury gets poached, you have Brian Johnson, who knows the system, knows the players, and can easily fill in. I think that's brilliant. And not every team has taken that step, and I think it's a very smart one to take.
But I would extend it too to Vita or David Blah or Anthony Lynn, who
exactly.
So I think there's some respective voice on there. So I agree with that part of the planning process. But it is, to your point though, this is arguably one of the more important drafts. Not just like you said, every year it's a big deal, but you have a chance to look at the positions they might fill this year: quarterback, left tackle. Possibly, I mean, I think they're going to come out of this with an edge rusher too in the first few rounds. So those are three of them, and maybe a corner. So you have premium positions that you can fill in the first couple of rounds. Like that's why, like, you can really set yourself up for the next several years.
And this is exactly what Adam Peters said they wanted to do, is to build through the draft. That's why they got the veterans they did, so they could go after these premium positions in the draft and really build a core that can stay together for 2-3 years at, if not more. So I think they've given themselves a really good chance. I think they have a ton of resources too. I mean, look at their cap space, 6 picks in the top 100. I think they've set themselves up well, but they also came into a good circumstance, after some really atrocious years to get that.
Right. And it's funny because, God, this is going way back, and you weren't here, and you were a little bit younger at this time, and I was probably about 14, but going back to like when they drafted LeVar and Chris Samuel. So those picks were acquired from Charlie Casserly's last draft in 1999. And so they set them up to get these picks, and it should have set them up for success down the road. And they kind of botched it because the management group was not very good. People may have heard that by now, but it was like, I go back to that time where like this draft should have set you up for a while. And it did not. And so, but again, quarterback is always big play, which is why this one becomes even more important, because but to your point, I'm rambling, I'm going all over the place here, but to your point though, you look at San Francisco, they built the roster. And so when we were in Orlando, like you would hear both Dan, maybe all three, Dan, Adam, and Josh Harris, talk about like, well, if you brought the number 2 pick, they would bring up the entire draft. Like, right. I don't think they want to put all the emphasis on that pick, because they know that you still have to build the roster around that person.
Right. And they've, at both places, they've done a really good job of that, especially, their mid and latter round picks, as you mentioned. I mean, you look at the 49ers roster, especially, at linebacker, where they've had a couple of the best in the league. It's just, these are guys that are taken in mid to late rounds, and they've really built out their secondary and their line too. I mean, they've done a good job over the years, and they understand. I still think Adam Peters, not to gas him up too much, but I really do think he's one of the top scouting GMs in the league. I think he's a really good talent evaluator, and that's something I think you need at that position. If you don't, it helps to have really good evaluators around you. But I also think it's important for the top guy to be a really solid evaluator. And he is that. You can look at his track record of the guys that, in Denver and San Francisco, even going back to New England when he was there, and some of the guys he helped pick. I think he's been instrumental in that.
I think that New England way carries through with the secrecy, which, it's to his credit, and everybody listening probably likes that more than we do, but I get it. I think it's important.
Don't love it, Adam. Feel free to change it.
But I think, you can trust us.
Yeah.
But the other guy that I think along with that is Lance Newmark. I think that was a good hire, because I think he has a good reputation, but he's also a guy who has a reputation being very decisive with some of his stuff too, which I think also helps as well. Yeah. He's a guy.
Yeah. And he's seen a lot, you saw what he's been with Detroit forever. He's, worked through a lot there, and he helped build up that roster that they have now, which is very good. So yeah, I think there's a lot to like about this regime, and it instills a lot of confidence. I mean, ultimately it'll, you got to win. So we'll see. And I don't think they could surprise. They could become the next Texans and start to win overnight. But I do think, this may take a little bit, a couple years, but it does, it feels like they have a plan in place to make that happen. It doesn't feel like they're just kind of hoping it happens,
Right. And I think whoever you draft a quarterback, if people see there's progress at quarterback, then you get to say, okay, you can get this done. And I think that'll be a big thing. So, but as far as quarterbacks go, we've all been watching this stuff. Mm-hmm. How do you break it down? Pros and cons.
I would pick. Is that what you're asking?
Well, if you want to say,
yeah.
But if not,
I would take Jayden Daniels. I would take Jayden Daniels. And I say that as a devoted Tar Heel. Sorry, Drake May. But I like Jayden Daniels' game. I think he's a rare prospect. He's a dangerous runner. I think Drake May is. I don't think Drake May gets enough credit for his mobility, because especially behind the line he played with at Carolina, he was always running up the middle, always. And he did a great job with it. And he has the prototypical size, he has the arm. Like I think there's a lot to like about Drake May, but I like the uniqueness of Jayden Daniels more. I just think he's an exceptional athlete, but a really solid quarterback, technique wise, mechanics wise. I think he can hit some really difficult throws. I think he can do all the things that Dan Quinn has said he wants in a quarterback, which I know you wrote a story about. Do you want to plug that story right now, or was my
I think I plugged it a couple of
okay.
times.
So yeah, I'm really intrigued by him. And I think with the right coaching staff, which you hope this group is, you develop them a little bit more. And I think you have something there. So he's the one I would go with, but
And
they didn't ask me.
well, and they never asked me. I think it's been to their detriment over the years, but not to pat myself on the back, but I don't even listen, it would have been garbage if I was running it. So we all know that.
I just think the biggest thing for this team is, and this I'm rambling too, and this goes back to our earlier point about it's more than just a quarterback, is they need long-term value out of their draft picks. I mean, these last 4 classes, they've gotten some good players, but the entire 2020 class is gone already. Like that's
amazing.
It's crazy. Like to build through the draft, you need guys that stick around, quality players that can stick around. And that's, how you make the finances work too, is, you get guys on, their rookie deals, get a lot of value out of them and keep the really good ones and, move on. But you got to find guys you can keep for the long haul. And I think part of it too was not the players, was, the changes they made, and, it felt like they were changing their goals and what they wanted to be so often that, the players didn't always fit. But, I do feel confident that this group is finding the right players for their scheme and their personnel, and hopefully they can continue to do that in the draft.
Well, and I think what you also have to hope is that for their sake, that they have a better setup to develop some of these players too. Yes. And I think that's a big key, because that's a huge key going forward. There is a responsibility for coaching. I'm always going to put the athlete's got to do the job first and foremost himself. You got to put in the work to do that. Then you have the coach who can help then get you to max out. And when you have that, then you can get a special player and you can get a better team doing that. Now, I'm with you. Like, I really like Jaden Daniels. I like his ability as a passer as much as a runner, because if you only had the one, I think you're not going to can you sustain that? Right. But I think he's a good passer as well. And I think that's where, when I would talk to people on the league, it's his ability to play quarterback, I think sets him apart. Yeah. And now, having said that, Nicki, and I'm going to sit on that fence, but if they draft Drake May, I was like, well, I can see this, and this is his game, why you like it. JJ McCarthy, I still would favor one of these other guys, but if you're Dan Quinn or Adam Peters, do you just like him? He can run. He's made some big throws, just doesn't have the same depth of film throwing the ball as these other guys. So,
it's 28 starts compared to, 28 games or something, compared to 55-ish for the others.
Yeah. And the number of attempts and all that. Yeah. But there are aspects of his game okay, if you fall in love with this, I can see it for what you're trying to do here, but I think, everything I've heard about Jaden has been pretty good. Mm-hmm. So that's why, I would go that way, but I can understand each of these guys having what their appeal is to a team.
Right. And I think, yeah, sorry to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
I think it's like a 2-part evaluation, right? You're evaluating what these guys have done already, the skills they have now, what they could do that can immediately translate to the pro game, but also projecting their ceiling. How much better could they get? And sometimes that ceiling can outweigh the skills they already have, which, may be the case if somebody really falls in love with Drake May. I think he has a huge ceiling, just with his size, his skill set, his leadership too, which sounds like it's been pretty good. It sounds like he has a good rapport with guys in the locker room. And so I think that's sort of the tough part about these evaluations. And there's some science to it, just with, all the analytics that's available, of course, just studying the game film, but a lot of it is frankly a crapshoot, and you're trying to decide, can we get him to his ceiling, and do his skills, do his current skills translate well to our system? And that's tough.
It's, it's funny because I've talked to Logan Paulson about this too. And he brought up, there's so many, if you're trying to evaluate a defensive tackle, you're going to look at a couple a couple qualities that or traits that they have, right? You don't need to see everything. With a quarterback, there's so much more than just certain traits, right? And like there's a handoff, like the quarterback has to be able to hand off in the pocket. Like that's
like that,
that
huh?
was a, I wasn't
That
sure
was
that's going to be like,
seamless.
was that, you could have like had a little play action there with that handoff.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyway, if you're listening
Take
to it,
notes.
not watching, this
Take
is
notes.
going to go over your head, but yeah, anyways. Like there are so many more categories to evaluate for a quarterback, which is why if there's two for some other position, there's 8 for a quarterback. That's why there's a big miss at times because, and that's why, Nicki, I think it's important to go through the process and not fall in love with the guy too soon. Because what if you overlook something throughout that process?
No, absolutely. I mean, there's just so much importance placed on that one position. I mean, that is and it's unlike any other league, of course, because there's that one position can define your entire season, the entire trajectory of your franchise, as we've seen in Washington. And they do have more information at their disposal nowadays. And in some ways, I think that makes it harder, kind of, sifting through all this information, deciding how much stock to put into each piece. I mean, I think there's some specific analytics that have come up and have turned into the bane of our existence in recent months, because how do you put that into context? And if you don't put them into context, then it's an invaluable tool.
Correct.
It works to your detriment. But I think there's a lot of stuff that they have to go through, and it's not just things that you can quantify. It's a lot of stuff that, again, you have to project, qualities about his character, qualities about his leadership, things that references have provided, other coaches, other, friends, family members, all sorts of stuff. And it's a really hard evaluation to make.
How much do you enjoy rumors at this time of the year?
I really love the mute function on Twitter. That's what I like at this time of year.
And that's what, it's funny because like you see all this stuff, it's like you always go with what you know. That's it. As a reporter, it's just go with what you know and ignore, don't ignore the noise, because the noise is oftentimes, and this will always, like, especially a quarterback, you're going to get the guy climbing and you realize like, well, there have been times in the past, like I knew they didn't like this guy. Like Blaine Gabbert was a guy I knew they didn't like. And yet right before the draft, it's like, oh, Washington really likes him. It was like, no, they don't. Like that's somebody putting it out there and they're wrong. But you get all those rumors and it's just, it can be
the rumors and the failed aggregations where it's like Twitter becomes like a game of telephone.
or aggregations that get taken out of, that take things out of context.
Exactly.
That's the frustrating one, because then it's like, no, I didn't actually say it that way, or someone else didn't say it that way. So that's the fun part of that. Anyways, by the time this comes out, it'll be about a week and a half before it's over, and then we can move on. And
then we move on to the next big thing, right?
But here's the thing, Nicki, like for our purposes, in 1 year, we would have covered it. Nobody else I don't think has ever done this. A coach, an ownership search, a GM, a coach, and a quarterback. So the top 4 spots in an organization. If this hits, we may not have to cover anything but football for a while if it hits.
Yeah. I think Carolina in 2020 came the closest, right? Or 2019 with the Jerry Richardson stuff, and then Ron was out, and then, but I don't know that I
don't think they had it all at one time though. And
it was like kind of over a couple of years, but welcome to Washington.
But if it hits, we may not have to cover any of those kind of searches for.
Bite your tongue. You just jinxed us. Now it's going to be insanity for like the next 3 years. They'll find something.
That is true. That is true, because and I'm going to blame Les Carpenter too for the last 5 years, because Les Carpenter was on the beat. And in 2018, midway through the 2018 season, he's like, I thought it was going to be a lot of craziness on this beat, and it's been kind of boring. I'm paraphrasing, and
then he leaves, and then he goes and covers, the Olympics, and now he's going to Paris.
Shortly after he said that, then Alex Smith breaks his leg, and then you go through, 55 quarterbacks over the next couple of weeks. They claim Reuben Foster, and that gets messed up. And there's this thing, DJ Swearinger goes off, and it's just one thing after another from that point to now. And so thank you, Les. I hope you enjoy your.
Yes. I'm going to remind him of this while he's in vacation at the beach, actually.
There you go. Anyway, Nicki, Got any final thoughts on this? Like, I'm ready. I'm kind of
Okay.
quarterbacked out, but people, it's what.
It's going to be a fun draft. It's going to be really interesting,
Yeah.
I think. And I think Washington is in such a prime position to screw up everybody's board. And I just kind of love that, like, let's just
Well,
have some surprises. I like surprises.
surprises are fun. And I will say too, again, going back to what we're saying, what we're talking about now is quarterbacks and which one they should take. And people need to remember a year ago it was who might be the owner.
Correct.
2 years for the 2 years before that, it was Congress and the NFL investigating, and everything else didn't matter. So kind of enjoy the fact that all we're talking about now is which quarterback should they take. And, so there you go. So it's a little bit different. So
Almost
I enjoy.
like normal.
Yeah.
I can't believe I said that.
There you go.
Crazy.
Anyways, Nicki, congrats again. And thanks for coming on. Always appreciated. And I know a lot of people are happy for you. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
That's it for this episode. Thanks to Nicki for joining me, and thank you, as always, for tuning in. I'll be back on Tuesday with another episode. I'll talk to you next time.